Here are the fantasy follows, starts and sits for week 5 of fantasy football. Starting with the quarterbacks. The top start is Drew Brees from the New Orleans Saints, playing in the Monday night game versus the LA Chargers. The Chargers giving up the 4th most fantasy points to the quarterback position. Now, Brees has averaged 2 touchdowns per game this season, and there's a good chance he gets star receiver Michael Thomas back this week. The Chargers, they have allowed 27 or more fantasy points in 2 of their 4 games. Last week, they allowed 5 touchdowns to Tom Brady, and they are currently allowing the 8th most passing yards in the league. Drew Brees, the top start. The rest of the top 5. Justin Herbert from the Chargers at the Saints. Number 3, Deshaun Watson from the Texans versus Jacksonville. Number 4, Teddy Bridgewater for the Panthers at Atlanta. And number 5, Kirk Cousins from the Minnesota Vikings playing at Seattle. The top sit is Baker Mayfield from the Cleveland Browns, playing against the Indianapolis Colts. The Colts allowing the fewest fantasy points to the quarterback position. Now, this Colts D much improved since last year. They have had 7 interceptions in the last 3 games, and they have held 3 of their 4 opponents to under 175 passing yards. They are currently allowing the fewest passing yards in the league. Mayfield has had only 1 game over 200 yards this season. Now, it was a nice win last week against the Cowboys, but this week, much different. Baker Mayfield, the top sit. The rest of the top 5, Derek Carr from the Raiders playing at Kansas City. Ryan Fitzpatrick from Miami at the 49ers. Nick Foles from the Bears versus the Bucks. That's the Thursday night game. And Kyle Allen for Washington versus the LA Rams. Now over to the wide receiver spot. The top start is Justin Jefferson from the Minnesota Vikings, playing the Seattle Seahawks. The rookie Jefferson is hot. 100-plus yards the last 2 games, including that big 175-yard game in Week 3. Now, the Seahawks, they are allowing the most fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. They have allowed 7 100-plus yard receivers this year and 7 receivers to top the 20 fantasy point mark. And they are allowing the most passing yards in the league. I think this is a big game for Justin Jefferson. The rest of the top 5. Number 2, DK Metcalf from the Seahawks versus the Vikings. Number 3, Robbie Anderson from the Panthers at Atlanta. Number 4, Darius Slayton from the Giants at the Cowboys. And number 5, Keenan Allen from the Chargers at New Orleans. The top sit is Robert Woods from the LA Rams, playing at Washington. Washington allowing the 2nd fewest fantasy points to the wide receiver spot. Now, this past game in LA still slumping a little bit as Coach Sean McVay wants this team to be a run-first team. Woods has averaged just 41 yards receiving over his last 3 games, and Washington has allowed only 1 receiver this year to top 70 yards. They are allowing the 4th fewest passing yards in the league. And that makes Robert Woods the top sit this week. The rest of the top 5, Jamison Crowder, number 2 from the Jets versus Arizona. Number 3, Odell Beckham Jr. from the Browns versus the Colts. Number 4, A.J. Green from Cincinnati at Baltimore. And number 5, Brandon Cooks from the Texans versus the Jaguars. The top 5 starts and sits at the running back spot. The top start is James Robinson from the Jacksonville Jaguars. Robinson having a great season after largely not being on the radar at draft time. He has had over 100 total yards each of his last 3 games, and over that span, he has averaged 22.27 fantasy points. Now, Houston, they are allowing the 4th most fantasy points to the running back position. They have allowed 3 100-yard rushers this year and 3 rushing touchdowns they allowed last week versus the Minnesota Vikings. They are allowing the most rush yards in the league. I think this is another great game for James Robinson. The rest of the top 5. Number 2, Mike Davis for Carolina at Atlanta. Number 3, Todd Gurley for Atlanta versus the Panthers. Number 4, Josh Jacobs from the Raiders at the Chiefs. And number 5, James Conner from Pittsburgh versus Philadelphia. The top sit is Kareem Hunt for the Cleveland Browns. Hunt playing the Indianapolis Colts. They are allowing the 4th fewest fantasy points to the running back spot. This is a real beware spot for me with Hunt. Of course, Nick Chubb out with injury, so you would think that this would be a great opportunity for Hunt. But remember, last week, Dearness Johnson came in and put up 95 yards rushing, and all indications are that Hunt still nursing a little bit of an injury. So best case scenario, he's still splitting touches, and worst case, he re-aggravates. Now the Colts, they have allowed the 4th fewest rushing yards in the league. Hunt has had 3 touchdowns in his last 3 games, but I think this is a real caution area this game for Kareem Hunt. He is the top sit. The rest of the top 5. Number 2, Myles Gaskin from the Dolphins at the 49ers. Number 3, Darrell Henderson from the Rams at Washington. Number 4, Philip Lindsay from the Broncos at New England. And number 5, Jeff Wilson for the 49ers versus Miami. And at the tight end spot, the top start is Hunter Henry from the LA Chargers, playing in the Monday night game at the New Orleans Saints. The Saints allowing the 2nd most fantasy points to the tight end position. Now, they have given up 5 touchdowns to tight ends this year. Henry, he's averaging just over 6 targets per game, but has not seen the end zone yet. I think that will change this week, and we will see a big game from Hunter Henry. The rest of the top 5. Number 2, Mo Alie-Cox for the Colts at the Browns. Number 3, Tyler Higbee for the Rams at Washington. Number 4, Evan Ingram for the Giants at Dallas. And number 5, Zach Ertz for the Eagles at the Steelers. The top sit is Mike Gesicki from the Miami Dolphins. This week playing at San Francisco. The 49ers allowing the 2nd fewest fantasy points to the tight end position. Now, last week, they held Zach Ertz to just 9 yards receiving. Gesicki, each of the last 2 weeks, just 3 targets and 1 reception. He did have a touchdown in week 3, but the Dolphins certainly have not been featuring him as much in their offense. And that puts Gesicki at the top of the sit list for week 5. The rest of the top 5. Number 2, Kyle Rudolph from Minnesota at Seattle. Number 3, Logan Thomas for Washington versus the Rams. Number 4, Jimmy Graham from the Bears versus Tampa Bay. That is the Thursday night game. And number 5, Chris Herndon from the Jets versus the Cardinals. For more on this week's starts and sits, join us on Sunday for the TFF Live Sunday pregame show. We're with you every week right here, streaming live on our YouTube channel at 12 noon, taking you right up until game time and getting you ready for your fantasy matchups each week. And here's where you can find us, the Fantasy Follow. We're brand new, and right here on YouTube, if you enjoyed our video, please give us a thumbs up and share. Leave us your comments below. Let us know if there are any players that you feel should be on these lists. And please subscribe to our channel now. We have a new goal of 100 new subscribers by week 7. So please hit that subscribe button and help us to reach our goal. You can check us out on Twitter at the Fantasy Follow, and that's fantasy spelled FNTSY. And don't forget, you could submit your lineup questions on Twitter by using the hashtag AskTFFLive, and we'll answer your questions live on the air on Sunday. On Facebook, /The Fantasy Follow, and our website, thefantasyfollow.com.